Do short theme song intro. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. It has finally happened. A real politician has braved coming on my show. I'm now a legit political YouTuber. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Kitchener Centre MP Mike Morrice from the Green Party. This isn't the first time I've talked about Mike on my channel. I mentioned him in my video Election Hindsight 2021, linked below. In it I said he stood a very good chance of winning. And I was right. Circumstances in that riding may have had some tiny influence on the outcome, but I feel that even if the Liberal candidate didn't drop out due to previously ignored allegations when it was too late for the Liberals to find a replacement, Mike still would have won. Why? In the 2019 election, he brought the Greens up from 4th place to 2nd. He put the work into getting involved with his community, and it paid off, not only for him, but for folks across the country living with disabilities who have been crying out for someone in Ottawa to acknowledge and fight for us. While Mike fights for us there, I'm fighting for us here. I'm using the tools I have to get the message out about the realities folks with disabilities are forced to endure. If you want to support my efforts, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, follow me on Twitter, share my content, and if you are able to help out financially, you can sign up to become a Patreon or check out my Amazon wish list and see if there's anything you can buy to help build my studio. Links in the description box below. Now on to my interview with a real politician. So welcome everyone to Left of the Box. I have with you a very special guest, Mike Morrice, Kitchener Centre MP for the Green Party. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Hello. So I'd just like to say that you are the first politician I have interviewed for my channel, so I very much appreciate it. And because of that, I'll go a little easy. I'll be a little biased. Not to mention, out of all the major parties, I probably have the fewest grievances with the Green Party.
Fair enough. And also, yeah, glad for the conversation and for the time together this morning. Thanks for having me on.
So, but most importantly, the reason why I wanted to talk to you today was the recent petition that you sponsored to the House, the Ending Poverty Disability, or I think I might have mixed up those words there, but please tell us more.
Yeah, so we want to be ending poverty for those with disabilities across the country. And of course, we know that those with disabilities are living disproportionately in poverty, right? I think it's around 21% of the population with disabilities. And yet, over 41% of those in poverty are Canadians with a disability. And so this for me is exciting because it's an example of where I think it's really possible for our advocacy to have an impact. That, the government has said that they would introduce the Canada Disability Benefit. They introduced a bill for it, as folks who might be watching may know. It's Bill C-35. Now, they introduced it very late in the session when they then called an election, but they also then put it into their platform. However, when it came to actually allocating money and things like the throne speech or the economic statement in the fall, it wasn't there. And so I'm really following the lead of groups like Disability Without Poverty, who've been calling for this for some time, and then trying to use the platforms we've got available to us to make clear that the last survey I saw was 89% of Canadians want to see this done, who agree that this is not right. And so there's an opportunity for us to kind of keep the pressure on. And as you may have seen, this petition, almost 18,000 people have signed on. It was one of the largest sign-ons of this session of Parliament so far. So the hope is it just shows this government that there is so much interest across the country to just do what they said they were going to do.
Yeah. I noticed that, like, on the petition, you mentioned that the housing allowance for people on disability is ridiculously low.
That's right.
Like $427. And there you said you couldn't even rent anything here. But the reality is, even with the full amount, we get $1,169 per month. You can't rent anything even with that amount. So people who are on disability, I can speak from experience because I am on disability. I have mental health reasons. And the only reason why I can afford rent is because I have a contract for my rent that went back over a decade. But if something were to happen to my contract, my rental contract, and I had to start from scratch, there is nowhere in this province or pretty much across the country I can even go and live off a disability. How is this acceptable? Like how has the federal government accepted this? How has the people accepted this?
Well, is that you're right. It's unacceptable, and it's the moral imperative for our government to do better. As Sandy, I've spoken with so many other folks across Kitchener, for example, who are in the same position, and what I've heard is unless family or friends have stepped up, where a sibling or a parent may be there to help financially or to provide good housing, that it's just very precarious. The anxiety that it provokes for folks as well, it's just not acceptable. And how can we look at that? How can we look at ODSP and say that that's okay? Obviously, it's not okay. And if it's not okay, then we need to be collectively working together to change it. And for me, this is why, again, I just want to try to kind of use the platform as best I can to just lift up voices of folks like yourself who've been calling for this for a long time, right? Like, this is not news. But obviously it hasn't happened yet. And so we need to continue the push.
Yeah, because over the past few years, there's been no increases in disability. So not even to match inflation, nothing. And yet every year our rent will go up $20 or so. So there's no way for us to meet that. And so somebody like me, I recently had to get a part-time job. And so then a lot of people might think, well, then you can work. So why does it matter? And the truth is, I hide a lot of what I'm going through at work. I'm very fortunate. The work environment I'm in is very supportive. They're very kind people. But I have regular anxiety attacks there that I hide from them because, especially with people who have mental health issues, other people get very uncomfortable very quickly once they know it's a thing. And ideally, if I had a proper safety net, knowing that should something happen to this job or should something happen in general and I have a complete break, that I'm secure, that actually allows me to relax enough that maybe I could work more. But without that backup, the anxiety in me is so much higher. So if I was getting something, like, I'm not even talking about, we don't want to live in luxury. That's not what we're talking about. We just want to pay the bills and get groceries. That is the bare minimum. And if I could have that, I'd be far more productive as opposed to this constant anxiety and attacks worried in the back of my brain.
This is about dignity more than anything else. And I guess for your viewers, we really should go a step back and explain what the Canada Disability Benefit is. Right? This is a guaranteed income for those living with disabilities across the country. And, well, full disclosure, I believe in a guaranteed income for Canadians, full stop, for the reasons you just described. Because for someone who is in between work, who might be looking to take a course to advance their skills, we know there are studies around the world and the pilot that started in Ontario as well. We know that providing a basic income for folks is good, good in terms of a social safety net, but it's good economic policy too, because then you have people who have the space without the anxiety to then focus on what makes them come alive. And certainly we recognize that the work towards a guaranteed income is a long journey. I'm glad that another MP has reintroduced the private members bill. It's, I think, C-223 is the new guaranteed income bill that was introduced in this last session just before the holidays. But we also don't want to wait for that longer process, that this is an opportunity to introduce a guaranteed income for a group of people who are, again, disproportionately facing barriers. So, yeah, there's no better way to describe it than, Sandy, having someone like yourself with lived experience share their own stories and how having a guaranteed income would change lives. And again, it's why I'm really encouraged, even if policymakers haven't caught up yet, to know that Canadians across the country understand this moral imperative. Do 89% of people agree on much of anything? It's pretty impressive, right? That 89% of Canadians are saying, we see you, we see family members, neighbors, friends, members of our communities living with disabilities, and we know we need to do better. That gives me all the confidence in the world to continue to advocate, knowing there are so many other allies. This is going to happen. It's really just now a matter of, if we can push hard enough and do it in a way that kind of brings others alongside, how much faster could this get put in place? That's exciting.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why it's becoming so popular these days is people are becoming more and more aware. Nobody chooses to be disabled. We don't choose it. And yet, especially with COVID and long COVID, more people are finding themselves in that category. It can happen to anyone at any time. And I think people have finally become more aware of that issue and have started to wonder, like, what happens if it happens to me or a family member or anyone else? Because even if you don't have a disability, most people are just hanging on by a thread right now. It's ridiculous. But one thing I was wondering is, out of all the MPs, we actually hear very, very little about anyone advocating for disability. So what got you engaged in this specific issue?
Well, I guess important to note, for those that aren't already aware, I'm a relatively new MP, so was just elected in September of this year. And for me, I wanted to center, and it's the reason why I ran with the Greens as well, is I felt like they gave me the best chance of focusing on democracy first. So what I mean by that is, to me, democracy should be about a person looking to listen to what their neighbors are telling them is most important to them. Not that we all agree on everything, but find some common ground across what that person hears, and then to advocate on their behalf and to be a voice for them. Instead of politics, which is about mudslinging and naming and shaming and scoring political points and all that I think we are used to seeing. And so for me, as someone, when I decided to run, I wanted to ensure that I could keep that focus on democracy first, on kind of holding on to my sense of self and my integrity. And with the Greens, there are values that align Greens, values like nonviolence and social justice and ecological wisdom. But as a Green, I also have the autonomy to focus on what I hear most from my neighbors. And so, as you may know, I ran both in 2019 and in 2021. I appreciate you covered the campaign in 2021 in particular. And through that time, knocked on thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. And each time, if someone was open to having a conversation, not everyone is, right? A lot of folks are, in the middle of whatever might be going on in their lives, and least of all might want to talk with someone that they see as a politician. But for those that did want to talk, my question always was, what's most important to you? What would you want me to know as someone looking to be your voice in Ottawa? And I was really surprised, if I'm honest. I'm a community organizer, started a couple of nonprofits. This was not a world that I had any experience in. And so the idea of, even for me, the anxiety for me, even in knocking on someone's door, That may be a separate conversation. But when people were willing to open up, I heard housing, the reality of the housing crisis we're in. And I also heard from so many folks that were living on ODSP, and I got to hear their stories. And by hearing those stories, that's then the reason what I said time and again was that, when we find that common ground as an MP, I then want to take it and find constructive ways to not just do the theatrics, but find those moments and those spots where we can take one of the priorities and make progress on it. And so, yeah, it was so obvious. It was such a high priority. It was so difficult, if I'm honest, Sandy, as well. Like some of the stories to hear from, someone I'm just meeting in the moment, and that they would share with me the realities of what poverty looked like for them in their day-to-day life. Like, how do you get by on the 1169? I have no lived experience of that. And so I guess it was also pretty emotional. And so it became kind of obvious that as an MP that this would be a priority. Now, I think it's also important to point out that as someone who doesn't have lived experience, I want to be mindful of how I show up in this. So this is where it was really Disability Without Poverty, Michelle and Rabia and others that were taking the lead on this. And, as an MP, I've got a platform that I can use. As you may have already pointed out, and for those that aren't already aware, in the petition, we have two calls. One is to fast track. The other is to involve folks with disabilities every step of the way, because the details are going to matter in this, right? And I've already been hearing from people with disabilities across the country. They're saying, well, wait, how would this be done? What impact would it have on my existing supports? And a lot of, justifiable concerns around, well, might they use this as a way to take something away, as has often been the case, right? People with disabilities have been so marginalized over so many years. So, a long-winded way of saying, because enough people told me it mattered to them, and that's what democracy should be.
Okay. So how do you suggest people get involved to help progress this agenda in Parliament, or just even making more people aware of the issue?
Well, I think, again, this is an important moment because Minister Qualtrough has made clear that this is something that she will continue to advocate for. And so letting your MP know that person can advocate to Minister Qualtrough, to this government. This is about, budgets are about priorities, right? And we've got a budget coming up in March. And don't tell me there's not enough money for this or that. There's always enough money for that which we collectively prioritize and reallocate funds. An example I often use is that we give $18 billion a year to oil and gas companies in subsidies in the midst of a climate emergency.
Yeah.
Maybe that is the kind of funding we could use to, yes, invest in a just transition, but also be investing in supporting those living in poverty across the country. So the one is, recognizing this timing that the budget's coming up in March, to advocate to your MP that you believe that it's important that we lift up Canadians with disabilities that are living in poverty, and that we provide a stronger social safety net through the Canada Disability Benefit. There are likely various forum emails you can find to do that. If you go to disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca, they've got a really strong campaign in place right now. You can borrow some text from them. If you felt comfortable to put it in your own words, that's even more powerful. Your MP's email address is just their first name, period, last name, at parl, as in parliament, parl.gc.ca. Another would be to listen to what folks with disabilities are sharing in your community. And what I've seen, it's really been impressive, the courage of people with disabilities in Kitchener to make clear and to organize. And so there's no shortage of voices in your community, I'm sure, as well. And so my other piece of advice, beyond just advocating for the Canada Disability Benefit directly to your MP, is to listen to what neighbors of yours with disabilities, what are they calling out for? What are they pointing you towards? And I think, starting with listening first to then be a good advocate and ally, to me, that's a really important step.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this very important subject. And I would love to, talk to some other MPs, my MP. She's more than welcome to come on my channel. I'm sure I'd have some I would have a very nice conversation with her, I'm sure.
Well, I hope she does. Sandy, I also wanted to say thanks to you for your advocacy and for offering this as another way to connect with folks, right? Mm-hmm. It's just so important that we continue to get the word out, that this is something that could happen over the coming months. And the more people like yourself who've got a YouTube channel, who've got a platform, the fact that you're kind of lending your voice to this and jumping in, I just really appreciate the chance to chat and for more folks to be hearing about this. And so thanks for having me on again.
Thank you. See, that wasn't so bad. I don't know why all the other politicians seem so reluctant to come on my show. I treated Mike fairly, and I'll do the same for any politician that agrees to talk with me. Please, no matter what party you're from, liberal, conservative, I'd love to talk with you. You have nothing to worry about. Come on. Come on my show. There's nothing to fear, so long as you're doing what's in the best interest of the people. Approximately 1 in 5 Canadians over the age of 15 live with one or more disabilities, so millions of people, and many are living with dire poverty. Legislation on the federal and provincial levels can be made to lift folks out of poverty, but they're choosing not to. The failures to properly support folks with disabilities has been a joint effort. 0.7 of our GDP is spent on incapacities, i.e. disabilities, which ranks us 33rd out of 38 of the OECD countries. The United States does better than us. The States, the country we like to act all smug towards when it comes to anything related to healthcare, them. They do better. Granted, they're also nowhere near where they should be, but if we can't trip over the bar they set, we're doing something wrong. This is what it looks like to have someone in Ottawa fighting for us.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians with disabilities are disproportionately living in poverty across the country. It doesn't have to be this way. Last summer's election call put a halt to Bill C-35, which would have created a Canada Disability Benefit, a guaranteed basic income for Canadians with a disability. And while I was glad to see the Liberals promise to move forward with this benefit in their most recent election platform, it wasn't in the throne speech or in yesterday's economic update. When will the government do what they said they would do, and are they willing to fast-track the design and implementation of the Canada Disability Benefit so that our neighbours living in poverty don't have to struggle through another 3 years?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians living with a disability face higher levels of poverty and marginalization than just about any other group in Canada. That's why we've committed to moving forward with a Canada Disability Benefit. We continue to work with stakeholders and community members hand in hand. We need to make sure that nothing about them happens without them. That's why we're working in partnership with them to do that. And we look forward to having the member opposite support as we move forward on that. And I will take my remaining seconds, Mr. Speaker, to wish to everyone a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and Happy Holidays, Mr. Speaker.
Being called out on your lack of actions and having no good retorts causes you to say words with no meanings, and sharp intakes of breaths indicates a struggle to keep your anger in check. So, Mike, keep up the good work. Links to all this stuff can be found in the description box below. And I'm not going to pass up this opportunity to rip into Justin Trudeau. I mean, have you seen any of my other videos? It's kind of my thing, It's what I do. Here's a tweet from a Twitter peep from Tyler Stack. In September 2020, he promised the Canada Disability Benefit. Since then, he's expanded MAID, killed the bill for the benefit, and shut down MP Julian's motion for a guaranteed livable basic income for disabled people. And then he said this on December 15th, 2021. Mr. Speaker, Canadians living with disability face higher levels of poverty and marginalization than just about any other group in Canada. Tyler rightly points out this is an old promise. Oh, and there's this time and these times. Let's break down a tweet thread from another time. Justin promised this from June 5th, 2020. I'm announcing support for people with disabilities, giving an update on the work we're doing with provinces and territories to safely restart our economy and more. Tune in now for all the details. And that link no longer leads anywhere. The Liberals are very good at announcing announcements and promising promises. The media reports on the first part, but never bothers to follow up to see if the Liberals have done what they said they would do. Quite often they don't, but we don't hear about that, so if it doesn't directly affect you, you're left believing it was taken care of. To be fair, they did follow through with this one. COVID-19 has had an impact on everyone, and for people with disabilities, there have been many extra expenses to deal with. That's why we're announcing support for people with disabilities today, including a one-time $600 payment for those who get the disability tax credit. A one-time payment of $600 to the small group of folks who qualify? Oh, and when you read the fine print, they should have said up to $600. Many who received this tax credit got only $300 or $100. This at the same time CERB was being handed out. This one-time payment was supposed to hold people over until COVID had run its course. Well, COVID is still a thing more than a year and a half later, yet no other supports have been offered. People who get this credit are often at the highest risk if they contract COVID. I hope they spent that money wisely so they still have enough now to pay for tests and N95 masks. We're also creating a national workplace accessibility stream to help people with disabilities find and keep a good job. And across the country, we're funding 5 new projects to help people get the supportive devices they need to overcome barriers in the workplace. What part of having a disability do you not understand, Justin? Yes, there are folks on disability who can work in specific environments, and there are some folks who have skills and can work, but in areas that would pay nothing for that labor. But there are many, many people who it doesn't matter how much support they get, they cannot work no matter how much they may want to. This kind of language permeates society and gives people the impression folks on disability are choosing not to work. In that video clip I showed earlier, Justin acknowledged the dire situation we're in. Whose fault is that, Justin? Huh? Whose? You can do something right now to fix it, but instead you're choosing to let us languish. And seriously, using that time after that message to wish people a Merry Christmas? Do you have any idea about the countless people on disability who were in tears over Christmas because they couldn't afford to buy their children gifts? Folks unable to buy themselves a nice meal on that day. Folks under the risk of being evicted and forced out on the streets. Folks who haven't seen friends or families for months because they can't afford proper protections against COVID. Folks who have been barely able to survive on what we're giving and many who haven't. Folks who are told over and over that we should be working, that it's our fault, that we aren't trying hard enough, that we don't deserve more, and that we are lazy and living off the system. No one chooses this. We did not ask for our disabilities. We don't want to live in dire poverty. We want to be part of the communities we live in. We want to express ourselves. We want to live the best lives we can with the bodies and minds we have. It's important folks living with disabilities have a benefit that can keep us stable. For me, with my mental health issues, it's like I'm walking on a tightrope. When there's a safety net, I relax and I can move around and take chances. I don't have to worry about a misstep. Even if the rope shakes a bit, I'm usually okay. Take that safety net away and I freeze. I cling to the spot I'm at, afraid to move. I exert myself to exhaustion to hold on, so when there's the slightest shaking, I don't have any strength left and I fall. If I were to be taken off of disability, well, You get the idea. Since the election, Justin had tweeted out something along the lines of, "We've got your back," 21 times, and there are even more tweets with similar messaging. Why repeat it so often? If it was true, he wouldn't have to gaslight us into thinking it was. The results should speak for themselves, and they do. He just doesn't like what they have to say. If you're fortunate enough to not experience a disability over your life, how can you look at what our government does to vulnerable folks and be okay with it? If they treat us like this, do you really believe they're treating you as well as they could be? Most people are barely hanging on in this capitalist wonderland. Do you really think that should you be struck with a disability, the government will treat you the same as they did before? Don't wait for it to become your problem. And yet, I see messages like this pop up in my timeline. "This is my PM and he's 50 today. Pretty nice, eh? At CPCHQ, at the..." You put a space in there, so it's just going out to the. And I'm pretty sure at the is wondering, what the hell? Anyway. "At the Jugmeat Thing, at Ford Nation, at Premier Scott Moe, and all you other people that can't spot a good man when you meet one." You mean a man like this? Or this? Or how about this? You think a good man is someone who takes Indigenous children and residential school survivors to court? Who won't provide clean drinking water and safe infrastructure to all Indigenous communities? Who voted against pharmacare for all during a pandemic? Who spends $750 billion in liquidity supports on a few banks that have profited during COVID? Or how about the $77 billion for fighter jets and the $286 billion for warships? Can't forget the $3.5 billion for a pipeline. A person who won't support the TRIPS waiver for the COVID vaccine so other countries can produce their own, saving countless lives and getting COVID under control before more variants are created. A person who offers people living with disabilities access to medical assistance and dying before proper supports to help them live. That is a good person to you? Or is it that you're distracted by the superficial elements you see when he's not wearing blackface? All you hashtag I stand with Trudeau folks need to wake up and realize the feeling ain't mutual. Oh, and Merry Christmas. We can have real progressive change in this country, but to have it, we need to support the people who are offering it. Together, we can make a difference. If you know of any politicians who might be willing to come on my show, please encourage them to do so. Just, don't tell them to watch any of my content ahead of time. Well, except the cat videos, those they can watch. But for all the people in your lives who aren't politicians, please encourage them to watch all of my content. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Twitter? Amazon sucks. That said, please check out my Amazon wishlist and help me build my studio. I know some of the items are big asks, but I guess that's why they call it a wish list. If you can, please become a patron. Every little bit helps. A special thanks to those of you who already have. Links in the description box below. Salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today. And all you other people that can't spot a good man when you meet one. My cat is now scratching at the litter bin, and I can hear it, and it's annoying. And I don't know if you can hear it, so I'll just wait.